It's the Ostrom Avenue Podcast, and it starts right now.
Welcome into another edition of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast here on WAER. As always, I'm Jordan Leonard, joined alongside AJ Myers. AJ, we got a bunch of stuff to get to today. It's a special 200th edition of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast. We'll hear from some former hosts and their favorite memories in just a second. We got SU football beating NC State over the weekend, getting back-to-back road wins. They're taking on Pittsburgh. Not this week. They're on a bye. Pittsburgh next week, who's ranked in the AP poll. And basketball season is very close to being upon us. ACC preseason polls came out just yesterday. We'll talk about all of that. But a very special Ostrom Avenue podcast here today. The 200th edition of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Ostrom celebrating its 200th birthday today. That's what I'm calling it. I've been around for 18 of these episodes. It's been a blast, and it's kind of crazy that it's 200 now. And you'll see like how it all started with some of the host memories, and it's pretty cool how we got up to 200 now.
I wish I calculated actually what episode I came in at. I'm gonna go look that up really quick. But it's crazy that
I did it too. Yeah,
it's crazy. Well, not really that crazy, but when we have an episode every week, you're eventually gonna get to 200. Yeah. But we're older than Sister Jean, which is kind of insane. Sister Jean's still chugging along at, what is she at, 103 over there in Loyola,
so, yeah.
Chicago?
Yeah,
something like that. I mean, it's been a long ride. I've been on since. Was now 2 years at least, going on 2.5 towards the end of it. I'm looking right now. I'm pretty sure my welcome aboard was episode 120. So this is my 80th episode of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast, which is kind of crazy now, just saying that number out loud. A lot of great memories. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but we got a lot of great memories from former hosts of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast. Take a listen.
Hello, Ostrom friends. Podfather here. Don't know how I got that nickname, but here we are. Huge congratulations on your 200th episode. As we talk about some of my favorite memories from the show, I think it was really just an overall sense of not knowing what the heck we were doing. It was myself and Owen Valentine, and we were just sitting in a podcast booth spewing our thoughts. It was really fun for us because it felt like an opportunity to kind of go, inside basketball, inside football, really dive into the stats and be more for a diehard Syracuse fan. And I think it's grown into a lot better form of that. We weren't talking to reporters. We just had our friends come in that were doing play-by-play for the game, and we just hoped that their charts were done. And we were like, hey, what does this opponent look like for this weekend? Those were the kind of interviews that we were doing. And to see it grow into what it has become, which is, operating like an actually good podcast with doing interviews with reporters and bringing on fun guests and things like that. That's really cool for me. As someone who started that podcast my senior year at Syracuse, I didn't know if it would last that entire year. I didn't know if after Owen left, anybody would want to pick it up. But now it's turned into a really cool tradition. And so my favorite memory has gone from having this thrown together podcast that is now morphed into going back to Syracuse for a basketball game and getting to meet the people that are now hosting the podcast that I didn't think would ever turn into something like this. So congratulations on episode number 200. I can't wait to share my favorite memory once we hit episode 500. So keep it rolling, guys.
Hey, Ostrom Avenue Pod. Ben Schulman here. Congrats on 200 episodes. A huge accomplishment. What a fun time I had being a part of the show for a couple years. Really tough for me to pick a favorite memory of the show. I mean, so many things, from having Jay Billis on right when him and Jim Boeheim were going back and forth a little bit, to doing some shows with all the great guests that we got, going onto YouTube for the first time, all of that. A lot to pick from, but when I think of my time on the Ostrom Avenue Podcast, I still go back to early on with Brendan Mortensen and Owen Valentine and the Barama Sidibe, Pascal Chukwu back and forth. So, I mean, it was a great time, very passionate in the WAER studios during that. But a ton of fun. Again, congrats on 200 and looking forward to 200 more.
Hello, Ostrom Avenue Podcast fam. Johnny Gadamowitz here checking in. SU class of 2023. As you can see behind me, still repping the New York Mets ahead of a big Game 4 tonight against the LA Dodgers. Very glad, by the way, that the Met lineage of Ostrom hosts is still going strong with Jordan leading the charge. My favorite podcast memory, boy, a lot to choose from. I tend to go to the bigger moments that Syracuse athletics had during my time there. So for me, I really look at the basketball run to the Sweet 16, obviously in 2021. I'll never forget hosting that episode after the win over West Virginia in the round of 32. Me, Owen Valentine, Ben Schulman hopping on. I remember one of the first things we were all commenting about is how we thought there was no way in the world here we would be, third week of March, not having flipped the calendar fully to lacrosse season yet. So it was awesome to just soak in and enjoy that ride. And then football, starting out 2022 6-0, and that was something that was remarkable in its own right. Obviously, a couple of big wins, beating Purdue, beating NC State, and I just remember really every week looking forward to hopping on and talking all the good that was surrounding the Syracuse program, because Lord knows, more often than not, the conversation we had tended to gravitate towards the negative. Outside of that, always loved having the friends of the podcast on, whether it was bantering with Brent Axe about the undefeated Onondaga Bridge, or getting Mike Waters, Donna DeTota's constant expertise. Plenty of great memories, and I'm sure there are plenty more in the fold down the road for you guys now.
Hello, everyone. Friends, listeners, Jordan, AJ, Johnny, Ben, Owen, Brendan. It's the 200th episode of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast. Glad and lucky to be a part of this storied podcast and audio platform. Just wanted to talk about my favorite podcast memory. The first that comes to mind, I think, is the 20th anniversary of the 2003 national title team celebration that Johnny and I did. Talking with Jason Horowitz, who was a sophomore back then, in his memories, talking with Brent Axe about what it was like on Marshall Street, and getting to pull out the cool Sports Illustrated magazines I have and just really celebrate the history of Syracuse basketball and what that was like. I think Jordan was a part of that too. But the memory is a little shaky at this point. When you get up into old age, your memory gets a little bit shaky. But yeah, the 2003 celebration, being involved with that, getting to talk about guys who had such an impact on the program was really, really special. And just to hear those amazing stories and put yourself in those shoes was really, really cool. But of course, every episode of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast is memorable in its own way. So, thanks for letting me be a part of this, and here's to 200 more.
Always great to hear from the memories of our former host, Ethan Frank. The nearly departed Ethan Frank, getting a little emotional there. The Ostrom Avenue Podcast getting to 200. Brendan Mortensen talking about how he didn't even think the podcast was going to stick. And now, what is it now? 5 years later at episode 200, we'll have to, whoever is the Ostrom Avenue Podcast host at episode 500 is going to have to reach out for him for his favorite memories. But honestly, for me, it's all these interviews, especially during lacrosse season, when you get to talk to Lars Tiffany or John Danowski for 40, 45 minutes at a time, just talking lacrosse. And I wasn't even a lacrosse fan growing up. I became a lacrosse fan when I got to Syracuse, but just talking ball with some of those coaches has been so fun.
Yeah, I've enjoyed all the interviews, especially, now these new teams that we're seeing, when you get to interview people for the first time, especially when they're excited to come on and they really find it interesting what we're doing. It makes it a lot of fun. And I think everyone always has some good insight, whether that's a coach or a beat writer or a play-by-play person. Everyone we interview is always really interested and really excited to come on. So it's really special and cool.
I love the recurring guests too. We got Emily Liker on a bunch of times. She's one of the queens of the podcast. I'm pulling up our interview list.
Tracker,
actually.
yeah.
The tracker. I forgot we had the tracker for a second. We track every interview to see how many people have done which amount. And as of the 200th episode of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast, Emily Liker and Brent Axe are both at 6. Emily Liker, great. Brent Axe, hilarious guy. Mike Waters could be getting up to number 6 in just a couple weeks. Basketball season starting up. Hopefully we'll talk to Mike previewing everything basketball. And then we are Lars Tiffany at 4. That's just how it is. Lars Tiffany, the best men's lacrosse coach, or at least the easiest to talk to men's lacrosse coach in the country. 200th edition of the Ostrom Avenue Podcast, celebrating it today. Cheers to 200. Hopefully we'll get to 250, 300 and go beyond that after that. And, something that hasn't happened. Go ahead, AJ.
I was just gonna say this may be a my problem thing, but when a guest gets to like 10 episodes, do we have to send out like a T-shirt or a little award or something?
Well, I don't know if you were on it last year, but Brent Axe when he joined the Sixes Club, he wanted a T-shirt. I don't know if we ever got him a T-shirt, but we might have to if it ever gets to 10. And
yeah,
if I had to take a guess, it's probably going to be Emily Liker. Just, football's king. She also covers men's lacrosse now for Syracuse.com as well, both sports that we cover. So we'll have to see who gets to number 10. We might actually have to design a shirt. That might be the plan for the next couple weeks, to try to design a shirt when somebody gets to 10 interviews on the Ostrom Avenue Podcast. Speaking of football, Emily Liker, Syracuse.com, covering it. We cover it as well. Syracuse got the win at NC State, 24-17 on the road to improve to 5-1 on the year, 2-1 on the road this season. Back-to-back road wins for the first time since 2012. First win at NC State since 2013. AJ, what were your initial reactions from what I thought was a gritty win from Syracuse on the road in a primetime game?
Yeah, it was a gritty win. I thought NC State looked like a team that was kind of desperate on the ropes. I think you could tell they know their season is in jeopardy, and now it's kind of over essentially, but it is. I mean, they got a lot of work to do now with that defeat to Syracuse, but I thought they did. There was good perseverance from Syracuse. I love how they leaned on the Quinn Allen. He had another great game, and defensively, I thought they were really good throughout the entire game, and I was really impressed with this performance. I thought it was a solid performance from Syracuse, and really they just keep chugging along, and not every win is going to be perfect. It's not going to be pretty. There was some bad spots in this game, but 5-1, you have a bye week now, and you got a tough game against Pitt on the road coming up. It's been a good stretch. This is a stretch that's been away from the Dome, and Syracuse has done really well.
Yeah, this was a game once Grayson McCall was out, Syracuse had to win it. Pretty much even if Grayson McCall was in it, you kind of really had to win it anyway. But again, this was a gritty win from Syracuse. Kyle McCord had a great game, 346 yards for the air, 2 touchdowns. LeQuint's kind of getting in that rhythm now, 91 yards on the ground, a touchdown. He also had a bunch of receiving yards. My guy, Jackson Meeks, again, 11 receptions, 116 yards, 1 touchdown. He's becoming that go-to guy for Kyle McCord, just based on what kind of receiver he is. And I think, too, and it's really undervalued here, is that Jackson Meeks, Trevor Pena, Arande Gatson all had over 70 yards receiving. They average over 70 yards each per game. It's the only team in the country that has 3 different receivers averaging over 70 yards. The weapons on this team are being highlighted because quarterback Kyle McCord's spreading the wealth. And really that's going to make the offense even more dangerous as they get that running game going, which I thought there was a good balance for the first time between the pass and run game. 42 pass attempts for Kyle McCord, 33 rushes. I can live with that kind of breakdown. And I think that's how you really attack an opposing defense, is set up both the run and the pass.
Yeah, and with that, those amount of passes, it's not like there was interceptions either. All those passes were good, smart passes from McCord. And like you said, he's got so many great options to throw the ball to. And I remember I said this at the beginning of the year. When was the last time you said Syracuse had great weapons? It just was unheard of in the last few years with Dino Babers.
Come on, Devon Cooper. Come on. Cordy Jackson. No, I do agree that the weapons are definitely better than years past. Trevor Pena's come into his own. Arande Gadsden's back. Jackson Meeks is a Georgia transfer. Still waiting for Zeke Haynes to get back too, who's also a pretty solid receiver, the transfer from Georgia as well. I also just think it has to do with Kyle McCord. I mean, you look at the quarterbacks in the past, the ability the arm talent and just the ability to play the quarterback position is just there for Kyle McCord. Reading defenses. I mean, you look at that Umari Hatcher touchdown. It was a play action fake. He had one-on-one coverage, threw back shoulder. You know, Umari Hatcher, good wide receiver. I won't say great, but good wide receiver is going to make that catch. But the ability to throw back shoulder to really take the defender out of it from Kyle McCord right there was elite. And that's, I think, just the definition of this offense. Kyle McCord's been one of the best quarterbacks in the country to start the year, even though he's not getting that attention. He's thrown for over 300 yards in each game. He had a little bit of an interception problem for a couple games, but nothing to be really concerned about. But when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, your offense is going to be led through him, and he's really carried this team to a 5-1 start.
You have a lot of trust. That's what you have in McCord. Every time he steps back in the pocket or, whatever he's doing, throwing deep or it's a short pass, you have trust that he's going to make the right pass. It's going to be an accurate pass. It's not going to be an interception, even though, again, he had a few interceptions at the beginning of the year. But you just have the faith and trust in McCord to lead this team down the field, and he's doing just that. And, I mean, as I said before, with the receivers, in years past, you didn't have that kind of trust at the quarterback position. This year with McCord, you do. And it's crazy to think this time last year, Syracuse didn't really have a quarterback by this point, or it was getting to that point where there was Dan Villari lining up under center. But now a totally different Syracuse team with McCord, and he's done really well. I mean, he's done everything you would expect him to do in his Syracuse career thus far.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't exactly at this point last year when Gary got injured against Virginia Tech, but they were basically playing with a quarterback with a torn labrum and then a tight end at quarterback. So completely different kind of season for Syracuse football. And again, Jackson Meeks, Trevor Pena, Ryan Gasson, all averaging over 70 yards, receiving yards per game. Jackson Meeks actually now the leading receiver on the team with 459 receiving yards compared to Trevor Pena's 458. Again, my guy, Jackson Meeks, what a season he is having. That's compared to, and I'm bringing up the receiving stats if Cuse.com wants to load a little bit faster. Damian Alford had 610 receiving yards last year. Yamari Hatcher had 482, Donovan Brown 321. Those were your top three receivers. All three receivers are on pace to surpass Damian Alford's mark as the leading receiver last year. All three of them this year. That just shows how much the passing game has improved in just 1 year's time.
And that's solely because of McCord. I mean, I know that like the last year's receivers are less talented than the group that is this year. This year's group is definitely more talented, but you just didn't have a guy like McCord throwing them the ball. And he's so accurate with his passes and he can get the ball downfield so well. And Jackson Meeks, I didn't think he would be the deep threat that he is, but he really is. Any deep ball down the field is probably going to Jackson Meeks the way McCord can hook up with him.
When I was telling Austin Barrick, a WAER Sports Talk member on the double overtime the other night, it all goes back to me for the Ohio game. When Jackson Meeks made that contested catch, it was really his only catch of the game. That showed that, to Kyle McCord at least, that, I'm going to go make a play for you, QB. And I think that really enhanced the trust within that group. I mean, Syracuse passing offense, second in the ACC behind Miami with Cam Ward, who's quarterbacking that team, a pretty good offense there. Sixth best scoring offense in the ACC. So the offense has been king for Syracuse football, but the defense also played pretty well against NC State. How about Justin Barron? 8 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, 2 turnovers, just his second interception of the game. And you really can't understate how important Justin Barron's play has been, shifting down from the star position to the linebacker position since Marlowe Wax went out with an injury earlier this season.
Yeah, and this team really hasn't missed Marlowe Wax that much, I don't think. It's going to be great when he comes back, obviously, but it's not. When he went down, there was a concern from me. I'm like, uh-oh, this guy was key for Syracuse. He never missed a game. He was a leader on defense, but the defense really hasn't skipped a beat, whether it's Justin Barron, Fadil Diggs has done excellent as well on the defensive side of the ball. So credit to Syracuse's defense. They have not really missed a beat with Marlowe Wax out, and they had a great game against NC State. Probably the defense's best overall display was against the Wolfpack on Saturday, and it was a big part. They don't get those turnovers. Who knows what the final score is, but they were key. They were critical in the win.
Yeah, I don't disagree in terms of the fact that I think it was their best overall defensive performance, maybe other than Georgia Tech. But they did let the Yellow Jackets kind of get back into that game, whether that was the defense's fault or offense's fault. You can argue that. But I'll be interested too. When Marlowe Wax could come back for this Pitt game coming up after the bye week. And, does Justin Barron go back to the start position? Does he stay at linebacker? It'll be interesting to see the adjustments. And I think, anytime you get a Marlowe Wax back at that linebacker spot, it's not only going to help in terms of skill on the field, but communication and all of that. So hopefully Marlowe can get back for the Pittsburgh game. If not after that, we'll see how the defense can improve there. Special teams was better this past week to an extent. No block kicks. There was a missed kick, but no block kicks. There was a penalty that eventually gave NC State a touchdown on a NC State field goal. They were flagged for lining up over the long snapper. I will say I saw a picture on Twitter. He was not lined up over the long snapper. Should not have been a penalty. Yeah. But it is what it is. Special teams got corrected though, so that's good for Syracuse football. And now they sit 5-1. Heading to Pittsburgh after the bye week. Right now, currently number 20 in the AP poll. a big game. Not many people would have thought this, but a big game in Pittsburgh next Thursday for Syracuse, taking on another AP top 25 team, potentially to get 3-0 in that, and really kind of cement themselves towards the top of the ACC football standings.
I think this Pitt game's kind of like the UNLV game. Not many, when the schedule first came out, everyone kind of, breezed over thinking like, oh, that's a road game. Maybe it'll be a test. Maybe it won't. Pitt is having an excellent season, and this is the rivalry game, right? Is it Pitt Syracuse's rival? So I think this will be a good game. It's going to be a fun game Thursday night. Should be an exciting game. It's going to be another really good test. It'll be I'm sure that crowd will be up for it. Pitt's ranked. It's unlike in past years when Syracuse has gone to Pitt. I know the atmosphere hasn't really been there because Pitt's been awful, but Pitt is not awful this year. They're a really good team. It'll be another really strong test for Syracuse to end this critical part of October where they had no home games, to end this final road game with a victory.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the Pitt stats right now. They've outscored their opponents in the fourth quarter 73-16.
Yeah.
That's insane. And really, if you look at it, Pitt has it's been the same thing of Syracuse. They didn't really have a quarterback that they could trust last year. Now they have the Alabama transfer, Eli Holstein, that's been balling out, 63% completion percentage, 1,700 yards, 15 touchdowns. He's been having a great year. It'll be interesting to see both of those two QBs going up head to head. And if you remember last year, the last time Syracuse played a Thursday night game was down in Virginia Tech, and it did not go too well for the Orange. I don't think it will be that way, given the amount of change that has happened in the last year, but it'll be definitely an intriguing matchup down in the Steel City at Pittsburgh on Thursday of next week. We'll put out some social media videos before the game previewing everything Pittsburgh for you guys on Twitter. We'll move on to basketball because the ACC preseason polls came out for both teams yesterday, and both of them are ranked 11th in the conference in the preseason poll. And does the preseason poll mean everything? No. Stanford finished last in the preseason poll and beat Syracuse at Syracuse earlier this year in football. But usually you'd like to finish in that top 10 range, especially when there's only 17 teams. I'm not as shocked about the men's team, AJ, but I'm a little shocked the women's team finished a little bit lower.
Yeah, I mean, here's my thing with preseason polls. I take them for granted. I don't like them. I don't look at them mainly because I think when people look at it, they're like, oh, Duke for the men's side, I'll just go Duke, North Carolina. Yep, they're gonna be up top. And then it's like that, like 5 to 15. It's just kind of like, oh, let's put the team at 11, let's put them at 8, let's put them at 9. There's no real judgment. It's just kind of throwing teams in there in the middle. I think that's what happened with Syracuse on the men's side. And I think on the women's side, I think they're just looking at it, DeAsia Fair's not there anymore. They lost a few players to the transfer portal. They're not going to be as good as they were last year. Let's put them at 11. That's all I look at it. I really don't judge preseason polls that much at all because you haven't seen these teams play, especially with both the men's and women's team. There's a lot of new players. There's some new faces. You really don't know how it's all going to gel yet. You just don't. So I don't take preseason polls that, I get why people talk about them. It's something to talk about. It's, get excited for basketball, but I don't take them with too much emphasis really. And I think the reason the women's team was further down there is just because lost a few players to the transfer portal and DeAsia Fair's gone. But once they start playing, I'm sure that'll change. Yeah,
I think you just said it perfectly. I think there's question marks on both teams. One, the men's team meshing in terms of, I think they have enough talent to be, upper 10 of the ACC, but
you just haven't
how do they mesh early? They haven't played together. It's pretty much all new players except for, give or take 3 of them. And then, like you said, women's team, when you lose DeAsia Fair, you're most likely going to take a step back, but how far is that step back? Can Georgia Woolley step up and really take over this team? Can any of the transfers, any of the freshmen that are coming in, step up and really kind of show who they are going into the beginning of the year? And I think that's the good thing about non-conference play. I think, if they did a preseason poll right before conference play started, that might be a little bit more of an accurate assessment, especially, men's teams playing Texas early. They're playing Tennessee in the ACC SEC Challenge before they get into ACC play. So we'll really kind of see what they're made of there. And the women's team playing a Maryland team early in the year. Maryland, I don't believe, made the NCAA tournament last year, but has always been a perennial tournament team on the women's side. So we'll see some of those tests early on in the year, really get a feel of how good those basketball teams are going to be. Hopefully we get Mike Waters on the podcast, whether it be next week or the week after, to preview everything SU men's basketball. should be an interesting Adrian Autry second season. Is there anything specifically you're looking forward to in the men's basketball season as of right now, AJ?
As of right now, I'm not sure. I think I got to do a little deeper dive on that roster. I'm more. I think I'm more interested to see if there's going to be more pressure on Adrian Autry, because I think first season he
it's
didn't
all
really
his guys now.
There wasn't. Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, wasn't much expectation for him to really perform that well. Obviously, everyone wanted the team to make the tournament and whatnot. But if things start going a little bit south once conference play starts, how much pressure will mount on Autry. I think that's kind of my big picture thing that I'm looking forward to. But in terms of individual players, I'm not sure yet. I got to do a little deeper dive on that roster.
Plenty of time to talk about men's basketball in the upcoming weeks as the season gets underway on November 4th against Lemoyne, an elite opening matchup. Battle of the 3-1-5, the two colleges in the 3-1-5. Lemoyne, first time they're playing D1 against Syracuse, I'm pretty sure ever. I might be wrong there. Might be wrong. But I'm pretty sure ever. But that should be a great game in the Dome. Then our next game on WAER, Syracuse football taking on number 20 Pittsburgh, Acrisure Stadium, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, October 24th. SU has a bye this weekend, so get your rest, relaxation, maybe go buy a pumpkin, get a Halloween costume, because Syracuse football is going to be going through the rest of the season. It's going to be a great season to watch. They take on Pittsburgh again Thursday, October 24th at 7:30 p.m. We got countdown to kickoff at 7 and the double overtime going all the way up until 12:30 in the morning. Can SU get a third win against an AP-ranked top 25 team in the season? Can they get a third straight road win? You'll just have to wait to find out. We'll break it down, of course, on the Ostrom Avenue podcast afterwards as well. We got you covered for the rest of football. Basketball starting up. It's going to be a busy time on the pod. AJ and I are going to be grinding during this crossover season, so keep tuning in to the Ostrom Avenue podcast every week. Happy 200th episode, everyone.